You think you're too good for this job, Sarah? Marcus Rodriguez shoved the electronic tip jar across the bar, his face inches from hers. Because I got 20 white girls who'd kill for your position. Sarah Williams didn't flinch. Her voice cut through the Friday night chaos like steel. I earned every dollar in that jar, and you know it. You earned nothing. This is my bar, my rules, my money. The packed crowd at Morrison's Tap House kept drinking, laughing, spending, unaware their tips were fueling a war. Marcus's hand hovered over the tip jar's reset button, a silent threat. In the shadows of Booth 7, a man in ripped work clothes set down his beer. His calloused fingers trembled, not from poverty, but from rage. His broken appearance masked a secret that would soon turn this thriving Austin sports bar upside down. They had no idea who was really watching. The Millionaire owner had heard enough. 3 weeks earlier, James Morrison stared at the quarterly report spread across his granite kitchen counter. The numbers made no sense. 800 customers weekly, $45 average ticket. That's $36,000 in revenue. He ran his fingers through graying hair, the same gesture he'd made during his most stressful tech acquisitions. Morrison's Tap House should have been a gold mine. Instead, the profit margins looked like a charity case. His phone buzzed. Another 5-star review. Best sports bar in Austin, always packed, amazing service, great vibes. The reviews kept pouring in. TripAdvisor ranked them number 3 in the city. Food bloggers raved about their craft beer selection and loaded nachos. So where the hell was his money? James had sold his last startup to Google for $47 million. He understood profit margins, operational efficiency, and customer acquisition costs. But these numbers defied logic. High revenue, massive customer satisfaction, prime downtown location, yet his accountant kept asking awkward questions about cash flow. 20 miles across town, Sarah Williams sat in her Honda Civic outside Morrison's, counting crumpled bills by dashboard light. $19.47. Not enough for rent, definitely not enough for groceries. The car smelled like French fries from her morning shift at the diner, her second job before coming here for the night shift. Her 6-year-old daughter's voice echoed from that morning. Mama, why do we only eat ramen now? Jessica's mom buys her Lunchables. Sarah had worked 53 hours last week across both jobs. The electronic tip jar at Morrison's beeped constantly during her shifts. Credit cards, cash, Apple Pay, Venmo, money flowing like water through Austin's hottest sports bar. Tech workers dropped $20 tips on $30 tabs. Tourists from California threw money around like confetti. Yet her paycheck barely covered gas to drive between jobs. Something was wrong. Something she couldn't quite name, couldn't quite prove, but felt in her bones every time that damn tip jar beeped and the numbers didn't match what she remembered. She grabbed her apron and walked toward the glowing Morrison sign, unaware that the man who held her financial future was 20 miles away, staring at the same mystery from a completely different angle. Inside Morrison's Tap House, the Friday crowd roared at a Longhorns touchdown. Craft beer taps flowed endlessly. The kitchen pumped out wings, burgers, and loaded nachos faster than servers could carry them. The air thrummed with conversation, clinking glasses, and the constant electronic symphony of credit card machines processing payments. Marcus Rodriguez moved through it all like a conductor, his gold ring catching bar lights as he orchestrated every transaction. The electronic tip jar sat prominently on the main bar, its blue LED display cycling through credit card payments with mechanical precision. Beep, $8.50 tip processed. Beep, $12 tip processed. Beep, $6.75 tip processed. Sarah delivered another round to table 12, tech bros celebrating a merger, each wearing Patagonia vests that cost more than she made in a week. When she returned to the bar, Marcus was already handling the tip jar, his fingers dancing across the touchscreen with practiced efficiency. Busy night, she said, watching him tap commands into the device's interface. Always when the Longhorns play. His fingers moved quickly, almost too practiced. You just focus on service, Sarah. Let me worry about the back-end systems. The tip jar beeped again, but Sarah could swear the amount displayed was different than what she remembered the customer entering on their table's tablet just moments ago. Table 9 waved her over for the third time. The middle-aged woman had been trying to get her attention for 5 minutes, but Sarah's legs felt like concrete. Her smile, once genuine, now required effort she barely had left after 14 hours on her feet. "Are you okay, hun?" the customer asked, genuine concern in her voice. "You look absolutely exhausted." Sarah forced brightness into her voice. "Just a long week. What can I get you?" But the truth was written in the dark circles under her eyes. The slight tremor in her hands as she took the order, the way she'd started forgetting table numbers. 3 jobs weren't enough. 50-hour weeks weren't enough. Nothing seemed enough anymore to bridge the gap between what she earned and what she needed to survive in Austin's exploding cost of living. Behind the bar, Marcus watched her struggle with the detached interest of someone observing a machine running low on oil. "She's slipping," he told Luis, the kitchen manager. "I might need to cut her hours soon." "Poor performance reflects on the whole team." Luis glanced at Sarah, who was now handling 4 tables simultaneously with the grace and efficiency of someone who'd been perfecting this dance for years. "She looks fine to me, man. Best server we got." "You don't see what I see," Marcus said, his hand resting possessively on the tip jar like a spider guarding its web. "Trust me on this one." That night, as the last customer stumbled out into the Austin humidity, James Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He'd built 3 successful businesses by getting his hands dirty, by understanding every aspect of operations from the ground up. Morrison's tap house was bleeding money despite every metric suggesting success, and spreadsheets wouldn't tell him why. If someone was stealing from him, and the mathematical impossibility of his margins suggested they were, he'd find them the old-fashioned way, from the inside. He opened his laptop and began researching undercover techniques, labor law, and tip pooling regulations. Somewhere in his restaurant, a thief was systematically destroying his dream business, but more importantly, they were stealing from hard-working employees like Sarah Williams, who couldn't afford to lose a single dollar. James Morrison had gone undercover in Fortune 500 boardrooms before, exposing corporate fraud and malfeasance. Now he'd do it in his own bar, among the people whose livelihoods depended on the integrity he'd assumed was there. The Millionaire was about to become Jake, the broke construction worker, and Marcus Rodriguez had no idea what was coming for him. The trouble started with a $137 tab. Sarah set the check presenter down at table 4, where Clayton Patterson III sat with his wife and teenage daughter. Tech money. New money. The kind that came with Tesla keys and entitlement. "This bill is wrong," Patterson announced loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. "We didn't have 2 bottles of wine." Sarah glanced at the receipt. Every item was accurate, 2 empty Camus bottles still on the table. "Sir, I can walk through each item. Don't sir me." Patterson's voice carried across the dining room. "I ordered salmon, not ribeye, and that wine charge is completely wrong." His wife shifted uncomfortably. Both knew he was lying. "I remember taking your order personally," Sarah said calmly. "Ribeye, medium rare, no mushrooms. You mentioned your wife's shellfish allergy. Are you calling me a liar?" Patterson's face flushed red. "I want a different server, someone who doesn't have an attitude." The nearby tables went quiet. Sarah felt dozens of eyes watching, waiting. Her hands remained steady, voice professional. "I'll get my manager." Marcus appeared instantly, all concerned with charm. "Mr. Patterson, how can I make this right?" Patterson painted Sarah as argumentative and disrespectful. Marcus nodded sympathetically, occasionally glancing at Sarah with disappointed headshakes. "You people always think you know better," Patterson continued, the words dripping with implication. "Well, newsflash. I'm not dealing with some uppity—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Sarah," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I need you to apologize to Mr. Patterson and his family." The words hit like a slap. Around them, forks paused mid-bite. Conversation stopped. "Marcus, I followed protocol exactly. The customer is always right." His tone carried parental disappointment. "Your attitude tonight has been concerning several guests." It was a lie. Sarah knew it. Marcus knew it. But the truth didn't matter here. "I apologize for any misunderstanding," she said, the words tasting like poison. Patterson leaned back, satisfied. "Maybe she can learn some manners." Marcus composed the entire meal and personally attended to Patterson's needs. Sarah watched from the service station, understanding she'd just lost whatever protection she'd thought she had. 20 minutes later, Marcus called her into his office. The space smelled like industrial cleaner and fryer grease. He didn't offer her a chair. "We need to talk about tonight's performance." "My performance was fine. That customer spends $300 monthly here." Marcus pulled out her schedule and a red pen. "You cost me money with your attitude." He began making marks. "I'm cutting you from 35 hours to 25. You're off Friday and Saturday nights. Carmen gets the VIP section. You'll handle back tables and lunch shifts." Sarah felt the floor drop away. Friday and Saturday nights meant real money. VIP sections meant tech bros with corporate cards. This would cost her $200 weekly. "Marcus, please. I have rent, my daughter." Should have thought about that before tonight. Another mark. Also, a $25 uniform violation fee. Your apron had a stain during the rush. $25 for a splash that happened during service. Sarah stared at her now pristine apron. "I need you to understand something." Marcus leaned forward, voice dropping. "This is my restaurant, my rules. You work for me, and you'll work how I tell you, clear?" The walk back through the dining room felt endless. Every conversation seemed to pause. Every glance felt like judgment. Patterson was still there, laughing with his family. Sarah gathered her things, avoiding Carmen's eyes. Luis from the kitchen gave her a sympathetic nod, but stayed silent. Speaking up would make him the next target. As she pushed through the front door, the electronic tip jar beeped cheerfully behind her, counting money she'd never see while documenting theft she couldn't prove. In her Honda, she counted the singles in her apron pocket. $43 for 8 hours. After gas and childcare, maybe 20 left. She finally understood the game. When customers used her race as a weapon, Marcus used their complaints as ammunition. The more she questioned missing tips, the more racist incidents would somehow find her tables. The more she pushed back, the more her hours would disappear. Tomorrow, she'd start looking for a third job. Tonight, she'd figure out how to explain to her 6-year-old why McDonald's was still too expensive. The system was rigged. The house always won. And Sarah Williams was just learning the rules. James Morrison couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office at 3 a.m, surrounded by printouts that made no mathematical sense. Revenue reports, employee schedules, customer reviews, vendor invoices, every document told the same impossible story. Morrison's Tap House was Austin's most successful sports bar and a complete financial disaster simultaneously. The latest weekly report lay open on his desk. 843 customers. Average ticket, $47. Total revenue, $39,621. After payroll, rent, and supplies, his profit margin should have been healthy. Instead, he was barely breaking even. Someone was stealing from him. The math demanded it. James had built his fortune by trusting numbers over people, data over gut feelings. But these numbers were lying, which meant someone was making them lie. He pulled up the security camera access on his laptop, a system Marcus didn't know the owner controlled remotely. The footage from earlier that evening played in grainy black and white. He watched Sarah Williams deliver checks, clear tables, and handle customers with professional grace. He saw Marcus moving between the bar and dining room, always positioned near the electronic tip jar during peak transaction times. Most importantly, he watched the body language. Sarah's exhaustion was evident even through pixelated video. Marcus's territorial behavior around cash transactions. The way other employees avoided eye contact when Marcus was handling money. James had seen this pattern before. During his corporate consulting days, he'd exposed embezzlement schemes at 3 different companies. The signs were always the same: financial discrepancies, employee fear, and one person with disproportionate control over cash flow. But corporate fraud investigations involved forensic accountants and legal teams. This required something more direct. He opened a new browser window and typed, "How to go undercover in your own business." The search results were surprisingly extensive. Undercover boss episodes, private investigator techniques, even academic papers on participant observation in workplace environments. James took notes methodically, the same way he'd prepared for hostile acquisition negotiations. Step 1. Create a believable identity. Jake Morrison became Jake Miller, unemployed construction worker recently laid off from a highway project. Cash poor, time rich, the kind of guy who nursed one beer for 3 hours while watching ESPN. Step 2, physical transformation. James drove to Goodwill the next morning, selecting worn work boots, faded Carhartt pants, and a flannel shirt with honest-to-God paint stains. The clerk looked confused when he paid with a black Amex for $12 worth of used clothes. Back home, he practiced the persona in his bathroom mirror. Slouched posture, tired eyes, the careful way a broken man moved through expensive spaces. He'd grown up working construction summers during college. The muscle memory was still there. Step 3. Backstory development. Jake Miller lived in a studio apartment near Riverside. Divorced, no kids, drinking problem mostly under control, looking for work but not too hard. The kind of customer who made staff uncomfortable but management tolerated during slow periods. James called his accountant and requested daily revenue reports for the next month. Any discrepancies would be easier to spot with real-time data. He researched Texas labor laws, tip pooling regulations, and employee protection statutes. If someone was stealing from his workers, he wanted to understand every legal avenue available. The final step was hardest, staying away from Morrison's for 48 hours while his new identity took shape. He needed facial hair growth, deeper exhaustion in his eyes, the subtle physical changes that would make Jake Miller believable. During those 2 days, James Morrison, the millionaire, disappeared. He stopped shaving, started drinking cheap beer, and practiced the particular brand of polite desperation that kept broke customers welcome in establishments they couldn't really afford. On Wednesday evening, Jake Miller walked into Morrison's tap house for the first time. He ordered a Lone Star, left a $1 tip, and settled into booth 7 with a perfect view of the electronic tip jar. The investigation had begun. Marcus Rodriguez had stolen his last $1, though he didn't know it yet. Night 1, the setup. Jake Miller ordered his second Lone Star at 9:47 p.m. and settled deeper into booth 7. The perfect vantage point, close enough to observe the bar operations, far enough to remain invisible. Sarah Williams approached with professional wariness. Broke customers meant small tips, but they still deserved service. "Another round?" she asked, noticing his nearly empty bottle. "Yeah, thanks." Jake's voice carried the careful politeness of someone who couldn't afford an attitude. "Busy night. Always when the Longhorns play." Sarah's smile was genuine but tired. "You watching the game?" "Not really. Just needed somewhere to sit for a while." She understood immediately. Austin was full of people between jobs, between apartments, between better circumstances. Sarah brought the beer without judgment. At the bar, Marcus handled the electronic tip jar with practiced efficiency. Each credit card tip generated a soft beep, followed by quick finger movements across the touchscreen. Jake watched the pattern repeat dozens of times throughout the evening. Beep, the display shows $8.50. Marcus's fingers dance. Display changes to $6.20. Beep, display shows $12. Quick manipulation. Display shows $8.40. The skimming was systematic, professional, and nearly invisible unless you knew to watch for it. Night 2, building trust. Jake returned Thursday evening, claiming the same booth. Sarah remembered him, the polite broke guy who tipped what he could and didn't cause problems. "Lone Star again? Please. And could I get some of those free peanuts?" The request carried careful embarrassment, the pride-swallowing reality of stretching every dollar. Sarah brought a full bowl without comment. "The kitchen's about to close, but I could ask Luis for some leftover wings if you want." The kindness was small but genuine. Jake accepted gratefully, understanding that Sarah was sharing scarce resources with someone she perceived as worse off than herself. While she worked her section, Jake observed Marcus's operation more closely. The assistant manager positioned himself strategically during rush periods, always within reach of the tip jar when credit cards were processed. His timing was precise. Manipulations happened during peak noise when beeps would blend into background chaos. More disturbing was Marcus's treatment of staff. White servers like Carmen received friendly guidance when they made mistakes. Sarah's errors, and Jake saw none that night, prompted sharp corrections delivered with audience awareness. "Sarah, table 6 is still waiting for refills," Marcus announced during a busy rush. "Customer service means anticipating needs." Table 6 had full drinks. Jake had been watching. Night 3. Pattern recognition. Friday night brought the weekend crowd, tech workers, tourists, college students with daddy's credit card. Sarah's section was consistently the busiest, her tips theoretically the highest. Jake watched Marcus assign her the most difficult customers almost exclusively. A table of drunk fraternity brothers who snapped their fingers for service, business travelers who complained about everything, and notably, customers whose body language suggested they might have issues with being served by a young black woman. "Excuse me," one customer called loudly as Sarah passed. "I asked for a different server 20 minutes ago." Marcus materialized instantly. "Of course, sir. Sarah, Carmen will take over table 12. Carmen got the table just as they were ordering a $200 bottle of wine. Sarah kept the fraternity brothers who were already 3 rounds deep and getting louder. The tip jar manipulation continued, but Jake noticed Marcus took larger percentages from transactions during Sarah's table visits. When Carmen processed credit cards, Marcus skimmed roughly 30%. When Sarah's customers paid, the theft increased to 40% or more. "Targeting her specifically," Jake muttered, understanding the deliberate cruelty of it. After the rush died down, Sarah approached his booth with coffee she'd bought herself. "You look like you could use this," she said quietly. "I can't pay for on the house." She sat across from him for just a moment, stealing a rare break. "You seem like you're going through something." Jake nodded, staying in character. "I lost my construction job last month, still figuring things out." "I'm sorry, that's really hard." They sat in comfortable silence until Marcus's voice cut across the dining room. "Sarah, table 14 needs attention." She was gone immediately, leaving Jake with coffee and the growing certainty that he was watching more than theft. He was witnessing systematic psychological abuse, designed to silence the one employee smart enough to notice financial discrepancies. Night 4. The mechanism. Saturday brought the biggest crowds and the most brazen theft. Jake positioned himself to observe the tip jar's display more clearly, confirming his suspicions about the manipulation mechanism. Marcus had programmed manager override codes that let him adjust tip amounts after processing. The electronic system showed customers their selected tip amounts, but Marcus could alter the final distribution with a few keystrokes. The restaurant's copy showed the reduced amounts. The customer's receipt showed the original tip. Brilliant, Jake admitted grudgingly, and completely illegal. The thefts weren't random. Marcus targeted busy periods when staff couldn't monitor individual transactions, focusing on customers who paid quickly and left immediately. Tourist tables were particularly lucrative. They'd never return to question discrepancies, but the racist targeting of Sarah was becoming undeniable. During a quiet moment, Jake overheard Marcus talking to Luis, the kitchen manager. "The black girl's getting suspicious," Marcus said quietly. "Keep her busy with extra side work. Tired people don't ask questions." Luis looked uncomfortable but nodded. Jake understood the dynamic. Luis was undocumented, couldn't risk his job by challenging management. Throughout the evening, Sarah worked twice as hard as other servers for systematically smaller returns. When she questioned an obviously incorrect tip total at the end of her shift, Marcus's response was swift and public. "Sarah, you need to trust the system instead of creating problems. Are you saying our equipment is wrong?" The question was a trap. Challenging the tip jar meant questioning Marcus's integrity, which meant questioning management, which meant putting her job at risk. Sarah backed down, but Jake saw the frustration in her eyes. Night 5. The breaking point. Sunday evening was slower, which made the conversations clearer and the theft more obvious. Jake had been coming for 5 straight nights, establishing himself as part of the furniture, the harmless broke guy who nursed beers and caused no trouble. Sarah approached his booth near closing time, exhaustion written in every movement. "Long week?" Jake asked gently. "Try to live a long life." She glanced around, confirming Marcus was in the kitchen, then sat down heavily. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do I seem like a difficult person to you? Like someone with an attitude problem?" Jake studied her carefully. "You've been nothing but kind to me. Professional with everyone else. Why?" Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "Because my manager keeps telling me I have attitude issues, but I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong. I work harder than anyone here. I know this job inside and out, but somehow everything's always my fault." "Maybe it's not about you." Jake suggested carefully. Maybe it's about control. The words hung between them. Sarah looked around again, then leaned forward slightly. You want to know the truth? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I work 50 hours a week and take home $320 because he steals our tips. But I can't complain because every time I question anything, he finds some racist customer to humiliate me with. I'm a black woman with bills to pay. Who's going to believe me over the smooth-talking manager? Jake's hands tightened around his beer bottle. What do you mean, steal your tips? That thing, Sarah nodded toward the electronic tip jar, beeps all night long. Credit cards, cash additions, Apple Pay, money flows constantly, but my tip total never matches what I should be making. I'm good at math. I had 2 years at UT Business School before I had to drop out when I got pregnant. The numbers don't add up. She paused, checking again for Marcus. But here's the real sick part. When I first started asking questions about missing money, suddenly I'm getting all the racist customers. The ones who snap their fingers, use coded language, make comments about my attitude, and Marcus always sides with them. Always. Why? Jake asked, though he already knew. Because it gives him cover. Every time I complain about theft, he can point to customer complaints about my service issues. I become the problem employee instead of the one noticing problems. Perfect system. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. My daughter asked why we only eat ramen now. How do you tell a 6-year-old that mommy's boss steals her future? Jake felt rage building in his chest, cold, calculating fury at the systematic destruction of a hard-working woman's life. Have you documented any of this? What's the point? He controls the schedules, the tip jar, the customer assignments. I'm one complaint away from losing this job, and I can't afford to lose it. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly. Sorry, I shouldn't be dumping this on you. Don't apologize, you're being robbed. Yeah, well, proving it is another thing entirely. As Sarah walked away to finish her closing duties, Jake Miller made his final observations of the night. Marcus emerged from the kitchen and immediately went to the tip jar for the nightly cash out. His movements were practiced, efficient, the behavior of someone who'd been stealing successfully for months. The electronic tip jar beeped one last time as Marcus processed the final credit card tip of the evening. Jake watched him skim 30%, then pocket the cash before recording the reduced amount in the register. Tomorrow, Jake Miller will disappear forever. But tonight, James Morrison had everything he needed to destroy Marcus Rodriguez and save his business, and more importantly, to give Sarah Williams the justice she deserved. Monday morning, James Morrison accessed his restaurant's security system from his home office, a feature Marcus had never known existed. The owner-level access revealed 8 months of archived footage. James pulled up the previous night's closing, watching Marcus's routine through multiple camera angles. 9:47 p.m. Marcus approaches the tip jar during the final rush. His fingers move across the touchscreen. The display shows $47.50, then drops to $32.25 after his manipulation. 9:52 p.m. Another transaction. $23 becomes $16.10. 9:58 p.m. A customer's $35 tip reduced to $21 in seconds. James documented each theft with timestamps and screenshots. The pattern was systematic, professional, extensive. Every busy period, every credit card tip, every opportunity. He scrolled back through weeks of footage, watching the same routine repeat nightly. Marcus had been stealing consistently for months, taking roughly 30% of every tip while servers worked for artificially reduced wages. But the smoking gun came at 11:23 p.m. when Marcus thought the restaurant was empty. James maximized the audio and watched Luis emerge from the kitchen. The two men stood near the bar, confident in their privacy. "Another good night," Marcus said, pocketing cash. "This system's foolproof." "Sarah's been asking questions again," Luis replied nervously. "She's smart. She knows something's wrong. That's why I keep her busy with the racist customers." Marcus's voice was clear, confident. "Every time she complains about missing money, I can point to attitude problems. She can't push back without looking like the angry black woman." James recorded the audio on his phone, blood pressure spiking. "What if she figures it out?" Luis asked. "She can't prove anything. The customer gets charged the full tip. Restaurant records show the reduced amount. I pocket the difference." Marcus laughed. "We're taking 60 grand yearly. Sarah's the only one smart enough to notice patterns, but I keep her beaten down so she can't do anything about it. 60 grand? Luis sounded shocked. 1,200 weekly minimum. Perfect system. The owner never comes in, servers trust the technology, and the one employee who might cause problems gets neutralized by racist customers who do my dirty work for free. James had heard enough. He immediately called his attorney. Robert, I need to know about criminal prosecution for employee theft and civil rights violations. The legal consultation was damning. The recorded confession, combined with documented financial theft exceeding $10,000 annually, constituted felony embezzlement. The racist targeting could support federal civil rights charges. James spent 4 hours building comprehensive financial analysis. Credit card processing records showed actual tip amounts charged to customers. Restaurant internal records showed Marcus's reduced figures. The difference was staggering. Weekly average theft, $1,247, monthly theft, $4,988, annual theft, $59,856, nearly $60,000 stolen from employees over 8 months. Money that belonged to Sarah, Carmen, Luis, and 6 other staff members who trusted their manager. James calculated Sarah's specific losses. Marcus had been targeting her tips more aggressively, stealing 40% compared to 30% from white servers. Over 8 months, Sarah alone had been robbed of $7,847. The business impact was equally devastating. Those stolen tips should have generated employee loyalty and service excellence. Instead, Marcus's theft created a demoralized workforce and artificially suppressed profit margins. James printed the analysis, screenshots, and legal statutes. He downloaded security footage to multiple drives and uploaded the recorded confession to secure cloud storage. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Rodriguez had stolen nearly $60,000 while systematically targeting the one employee intelligent enough to notice, using racist customers as weapons to silence her complaints. The electronic tip jar sat on James's desk. He'd ordered an identical model to understand the manipulation mechanism. With manager override codes, Marcus could adjust tip amounts after processing. Customers saw their selected tips on receipts, but the restaurant's copy showed reduced amounts. The perfect crime, except for one fatal flaw. James Morrison owned the building, the business, the security system, and the bank accounts. Marcus had been stealing from someone with the resources to destroy him completely. Tomorrow night, James would return to Morrison's tap house one final time. Not as Jake Miller, the broke construction worker, but as James Morrison, the millionaire owner who just caught his assistant manager committing felony theft. Marcus thought he had the perfect system. He was about to discover that perfection attracted the attention of people with more power than you could imagine. The smoking gun was loaded. Tomorrow, James would pull the trigger. Friday night, 9:15 p.m. Morrison's tap house was packed to capacity. James Morrison walked through the front door clean-shaven, wearing a tailored shirt that cost more than most customers' weekly paychecks. The hostess didn't recognize the owner she'd never met. "I need to speak with Marcus Rodriguez," James said. "Tell him James Morrison is here." She hurried toward the kitchen. James positioned himself beside the electronic tip jar, centerpiece of months of systematic theft. Marcus emerged confused, extending his hand with practiced charm. "Mr. Morrison, I wasn't expecting—" "I bet you weren't." James ignored the handshake. "Ladies and gentlemen, could I have everyone's attention?" Conversations died. The silence felt electric. Marcus paled. "Sir, maybe we should discuss this privately." "No, everyone here deserves to hear this." James's voice carried across the packed restaurant. "My name is James Morrison. I own this restaurant. And Marcus Rodriguez has been stealing from every employee here for 8 months. "That's insane," Marcus sputtered. "I don't know what you think you've discovered." James played the recorded audio through the sound system. Marcus's voice filled the restaurant. "We're taking 60 grand yearly fees. Sarah's the only one smart enough to notice patterns, but I keep her beaten down so she can't do anything about it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Staff members stared in shock. Sarah stood frozen beside table 12, her face cycling through disbelief and vindication. $1,200 weekly, James announced, stolen through manager override codes on this tip jar. He gestured toward Sarah. But Sarah Williams was targeted specifically because she was smart enough to notice. You don't understand the context, Marcus tried. The context, James cut him off, is using racist customers to silence the one employee who could expose you. He played another clip. Every time she complains about missing money, I can point to attitude problems. She can't push back without looking like the angry black woman. The crowd's mood shifted to disgust. Phones appeared, recording everything. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, tears of relief streaming down her face. This is taken out of context, Marcus said desperately. She's been having performance issues. Performance issues? James's voice turned sharp. Sarah has the highest customer satisfaction ratings here. She's also been robbed of $7,800 because you targeted her specifically. He addressed the crowd directly. Your tips, money intended to reward excellent service, have been systematically stolen by management. Carmen spoke up from across the room. Is that why our tip totals never matched what we expected? Exactly. Marcus programmed the system to show customers their selected tips on receipts, but recorded smaller amounts for distribution. Marcus made one last desperate play. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it. James pulled out a tablet showing security footage of Marcus manipulating the tip jar. 8 months of video evidence, documented theft, recorded confessions, mathematical proof that this systematic stealing has been destroying employee morale and business profits. Customers were checking their phones, comparing receipts to tip amounts they remembered selecting. Sarah, James called. Could you come here? She approached slowly, still processing what was happening. I owe you an apology, James said loudly. You've been working for a thief while I was absent. You've been targeted, harassed, and robbed because you had the integrity to notice what was wrong. He turned back to Marcus. You're fired. The police are on their way for felony embezzlement charges. Marcus's composure cracked. You can't do this! I made this place profitable! You made it profitable by stealing $60,000 annually while Sarah couldn't afford school supplies for her daughter. Police sirens wailed outside. Within minutes, officers entered the restaurant. Marcus continued protesting as they handcuffed him, blaming Sarah, claiming the owner didn't understand operations. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus Rodriguez was walked out in handcuffs, his career destroyed in 10 minutes. This system enabled theft, James announced, gesturing to the tip jar. Tomorrow we will implement complete transparency. Every tip belongs to who earned it. Sarah stared at the device that had been stealing her future. The same electronic tip jar that had tormented her for months now sat silent, its theft mechanism exposed and powerless. Sarah, James said quietly, this stops tonight, and it never happens again. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with conversation as customers and staff processed what they'd witnessed. The electronic tip jar beeped one final time under Marcus's corrupt system. Tomorrow, everything will change. Tonight, justice had finally arrived at Morrison's Tap House. The silence after Marcus's departure lasted 37 seconds. Then the questions began. What happens to our jobs? Carmen asked. Are we getting our tips back? Danny, the bartender, called out. James Morrison raised his hands for quiet. First, nobody loses their job because of Marcus's crimes. You're all victims here, not accomplices. Relief spread across every face. Austin's service industry was brutal. Losing steady work meant disaster. Second, yes, you're getting every stolen dollar back. I've calculated 8 months of theft down to the penny. Sarah alone was robbed of $7,800. Carmen, $4,600. Luis, $3,200. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. $7,800 meant her daughter's school activities, new clothes, dinners beyond ramen. Third, we're implementing changes tonight that make this impossible to repeat. James looked directly at Sarah. I've spent 5 days watching you work. You handled difficult customers with grace, protect newer staff from harassment, and maintain professional standards under impossible pressure. You also have business education and mathematical skills to spot irregularities. He paused. I'm offering you an assistant manager position with full authority over cash handling and employee protection. Will you accept? The restaurant erupted in applause. Carmen whooped. Luis started chanting Sarah until everyone joined. Yes, Sarah said, tears streaming. I accept. James pulled out his phone. Robert, New tip system installed tomorrow morning. Complete transparency, real-time tracking, no manager override capabilities. Yes, Saturday. The triple rate is fine. He hung up and addressed the crowd. By tomorrow evening, we'll have technology showing every tip in real time. What you earn is what you keep. Sarah, your first responsibility is creating anti-discrimination policy with teeth. Zero tolerance for racist customer behavior, immediate consequences for enabling harassment, clear reporting procedures directly to me. Sarah stood straighter. What about customers who refuse service from black staff? They can leave. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who disrespects our team. That goes on every menu and the front door. A customer at table 6 stood up. What if that costs business? James looked at him directly. Any business depending on tolerating racism isn't worth having. We're building a workplace where dignity isn't negotiable. The man sat down. Other customers nodded approval. Now, immediate compensation. James pulled out his checkbook, drawing amazed stares. Sarah, $7,800. Carmen, $4,600. He wrote checks methodically, calling each employee forward. When Luis approached hesitantly, James spoke quietly. Your immigration status is safe here. You were coerced into silence. That ends now. Luis broke down as he accepted $3,200, more than he'd ever held at once. The ceremony continued until every employee was made whole. Total, $47,460. These aren't bonuses, James explained. This is theft recovery. Your money returned with interest. As staff examined their checks with disbelief, James outlined new operations. Sarah manages all tip distribution and employee relations. Problems with customers, scheduling, or workplace treatment go through her. She reports directly to me with my personal number for emergencies. He turned to customers. You've witnessed something that should never have been necessary. Morrison's Tap House is now committed to being Austin's most ethical employer. Fair wages, transparent tips, zero tolerance for discrimination. Spontaneous applause erupted. Customers approached to congratulate Sarah. One more thing. We're implementing profit sharing. When the restaurant succeeds, everyone succeeds. Sarah stepped forward, voice carrying new confidence. I want to thank everyone who witnessed what happened tonight. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when good people refuse to stay silent about injustice. She looked at the electronic tip jar. This device was used to steal our dignity along with our money. Tomorrow it becomes a symbol of fairness. The transformation was already visible. The staff stood taller, spoke freely, moved with the confidence of people whose worth was recognized. As the evening wound down, James and Sarah established new procedures, reporting mechanisms, and planned training on Sarah's anti-discrimination policies. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for believing me when I couldn't believe myself. Thank you for noticing what was wrong and having the courage to speak the truth to exactly the right person. Around them, staff and customers buzzed with energy from witnessing justice in action. The electronic tip jar sat silent, its theft mechanism disabled forever. We're posting the new policies Monday, Sarah announced to the remaining staff. Customer conduct standards, transparent tip distribution, employee protection procedures. Anyone who disrespects our team gets one warning, then permanent ban. Carmen raised her hand. What about scheduling fairness? Algorithm-based rotation, Sarah replied confidently. No favoritism, no punishment shifts, equal access to primetime earnings. Luis emerged from the kitchen with tears in his eyes. I can send money to my family in Mexico now. Real money. That's what honest work should provide, James said. Dignity, fair compensation, and hope for the future. The last customers began leaving, many stopping to shake Sarah's hand and promise they'd return to support the changes. Word would spread quickly through Austin's tight-knit service community. By midnight, Morrison's Tap House was empty except for James and Sarah, planning the revolution that would begin tomorrow. New technology, new policies, new leadership, all centered on the radical concept that every worker deserved respect. The electronic tip jar beeped one final time as the old system shut down. Tomorrow it will be replaced by transparency, accountability, and justice. The theft was over. The transformation had begun. 3 weeks later, Morrison's Tap House felt like a completely different restaurant. Sarah Williams stood in the break room she'd redesigned. Comfortable chairs, good coffee, and a bulletin board where staff could post schedules without management interference. Team meeting, she announced, her tone collaborative. The new tip system is working perfectly. Everyone's weekly totals are up 40%. Carmen raised her hand. I made more in 3 weeks than 2 months under Marcus. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. The transparent tip display had transformed everything. Customers saw real-time distribution, staff knew their exact earnings, and the psychological weight of constant suspicion had lifted. Luis, how's the kitchen feeling? Sarah asked. Luis smiled genuinely. Good, really good. No more fear. We can focus on making great food instead of worrying about saying wrong things. We've had 3 food bloggers review us this month, Sarah continued. All mentioned the positive energy. Turns out when staff aren't being robbed, customer experience improves. Danny, the bartender, spoke up. Table 7 asked what changed, said the whole vibe felt different. I told them we got management that respects employees. Sarah nodded. Customer conduct policy update. 2 inappropriate incidents this week. Both were handled immediately. One apologized and adjusted behavior. The other was permanently banned. How did Mr. Morrison react? Carmen asked. Complete support. He texted yesterday. You're handling everything perfectly. The numbers prove you're building something special. The room buzzed with satisfaction. Having supportive leadership still felt miraculous. Personal updates, Sarah said softly. Good news to share? Carmen raised her hand. Paid off credit card debt. For the first time in 3 years, I'm not drowning. Applause erupted. Luis? My daughter starts college in fall. With back pay and steady tips, we can afford dorm costs. More emotional applause. Luis wiped his eyes. Danny? Moving to my own place next month. Never thought I'd afford Austin rent on service wages. Sarah felt warmth spreading through her chest. My daughter, Keisha, starts piano lessons Saturday. She's been asking for 2 years, she gestured around. Now we can afford dreams, not just survival. The door opened. James Morrison entered carrying coffee and tacos from outside. Don't mind me, he said, setting everything down. Sarah, excellent work on scheduling rotation. Fair access to high-tip shifts and customer satisfaction scores are Morrison's highest ever. Team effort, Sarah replied proudly. James addressed the group. Profit sharing starts next month. When Morrison's does well, you do well. This quarter's numbers suggest a very good first payout. Excitement was palpable. Their improved service would directly benefit them. One more thing. Sarah, your daughter's welcome here after school. Luis set up a homework station during slow periods. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to. We're a team. Teams support each other. Besides, maybe Keisha will study business and run this place someday. As the meeting ended, staff dispersed with energy missing for months. The new transparent tip display beeped cheerfully as lunch crowds arrived. Sarah watched her team work. Genuine smiles, collaborative problem-solving, mutual protection. Carmen trained new servers patiently. Danny sharing bartending techniques. Luis teaches knife skills while encouraging creativity. At 3:47 p.m., Keisha Williams walked through the front door wearing her backpack and bright smile. Mom, I got the highest grade on my math test. That's wonderful, baby. Sarah hugged her daughter openly, no longer worried about appearing unprofessional for showing maternal love. Keisha settled into her homework corner with crackers and juice Luis prepared. Customers smiled watching the domestic scene, understanding they were witnessing something special, a workplace where humanity was celebrated. Sarah caught her reflection in the bar mirror. The exhausted, fearful woman from a month ago was gone. In her place stood someone confident, respected, surrounded by people who valued her contributions. The electronic display beeped as another tip was processed and immediately distributed. The sound that once triggered anxiety now represented fairness, transparency, and hope. Morrison's Tap House had become more than a restaurant. It was a community where dignity wasn't negotiable, and everyone's success lifted everyone else. The transformation was complete, not just in policies and procedures, but in the fundamental humanity of how people treated each other. 6 months later, Morrison's Tap House had a waiting list every weekend. Sarah Williams stood behind the bar during Saturday rush, watching her team work with genuine enthusiasm that drew customers back repeatedly. The Yelp reviews told the story, amazing energy. Staff actually seems happy. You can feel the positive culture. The electronic tip display showed $347. 82 distributed that evening alone, every penny going exactly where customers intended. The device that once enabled theft now symbolized transparency. "Mom, I finished homework," Keisha called from her corner table. At 7, she was already helping newer staff with math, inheriting her mother's head for numbers and fairness. James Morrison approached with quarterly reports. Profit margins up 37%, employee turnover 0, customer satisfaction highest in Austin. "More importantly," Sarah replied, "nobody's afraid to come to work anymore." The transformation extended beyond metrics. Carmen was enrolled in business classes. Luis had proudly introduced "my manager Sarah" to his extended family. Danny was planning his own bar using Morrison's as his ethical model. Word had spread through Austin's service industry. Other restaurants were quietly asking Sarah for advice on transparent tip systems and anti-discrimination policies. The revolution was expanding. "There's something I want you to see," James said, showing his phone. The screen displayed a local news story. "Austin restaurant leads industry change in employee protection." Sarah smiled, then turned serious. "This shouldn't be newsworthy. Treating employees fairly should be standard." "Maybe now it will be," James replied. As evening wound down, Sarah spoke directly to viewers who might recognize their own struggles. If you're working somewhere that doesn't respect your worth, whether it's stolen wages, discrimination, or both, document everything. Keep records, find allies, know your rights. You deserve better than survival wages and workplace abuse. She paused, glancing at the transparent tip display. "Don't let anyone steal your dignity or your future. Speak up. Change is possible when we stop accepting the unacceptable. Your voice matters more than you know." The electronic tip jar beeped softly as the last transaction processed, its sound no longer a threat but a promise. That honest work deserved honest pay, and justice was possible for anyone brave enough to demand it.